welcome to this first attempt at interviewing all of the judges in one hit. So I hope you enjoyed the experience as much as they are going to. You are, aren't you? And I hopefully will too. We all come out of this unscathed. But this is where you will hear the judges being themselves, being relaxed. You are, aren't you? The competition hasn't started yet, so they're not quite with their competition shoes on yet and ears on yet. So let's just find out a bit about the judges. They've all been in front of judges themselves, be they other judges in other competitions, other juries, be they producers, be they an audience in a concert hall, be the people at the other end of their CD recordings reviewing them. They've all been judged sometime, probably many times over. So I'm going to start by reading a small précis of each one. If you look in your programs, there's a lot that's been said about these wonderful violinists from the international stage. And I thought what I can do is perhaps go through and try and select 5 lines about each. Now you'll see later when you read your programs whether I've selected the right lines. You can read the rest. Right, let's start off with Michael Duff. Now, Michael, were you born in Germany?
Born in England.
Born in England, of English and German parents.
My mum's English, my dad's German.
Mum's English, dad's German, and now he lives in Australia. Right, and Michael has the distinction of being here as on the jury of the very first competition in 2001. So that's one point. He studied in Cologne and at the Guildhall. I'm just picking eyes out here, you understand. He was a concertmaster at Hanover's North German Radio Orchestra. In 1988 he became concertmaster of the MSO in Melbourne and then co-concertmaster of the Sydney Symphony. He's had many famous chamber music partners. He was invited to lead the Berlin Philharmonic Octet, Berlin Phil, Hermann von Karajan. These people figure in his background. The Berlin piano trio and chamber virtuosi. He's appeared at major festivals, and we can name Salzburg and Lucerne and Berlin among them. Recordings include the concertos of Beethoven, Tchaikovsky and Mendelssohn and others. And he received the Australian Centenary Medal for services to Australian society and advancement of music, which I take it as a pretty fair sort of an honour. So that's a thumbnail sketch of Michael. Now, Boris Galitsky, born in Russia, Boris?
Yes.
Born in Russia, but now living in France.
Yes.
How's your French?
Hello. You want me to talk? On va parler français.
English will do, I think it's fine. Now, in 1982, Boris won the Italian Paganini competition. That's one of the top ones. He participates in festivals internationally. Now, Sir Michael will like this because one of the great recordings you've done is the Bach Double, Van Sottenmutter. And the Chacon, which you'll probably hear 100 times over, or maybe 18 times over in the next couple of days. And the critics say something like this: Galitsky's charisma is glaringly obvious. Turn down the lights. Now this is an interesting point. We might talk about this a little later, but his father was author of the standard textbook for young violinists. That's quite something. And somebody else has said that you're a role model and leading light for young violinists. Kurt Bazur said that. All right. He devotes a lot of his time to education. We can't knock that. So Boris, is that a fair enough introduction?
No, it's fine. You
Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, right. Now Cho Yan Lin, born in Taiwan. Hello. And is now in the United States, and you heard before, a professor at Juilliard. He had lessons from the age of 5 with Sylvia Lee in Taiwan, and he had 6 years with Doré DeLay at Juilliard. Now there's a name to be reckoned with, Dorothy DeLay.
In 2000, in Musical America, he was named as Instrumentalist of the Year. Enjoys chamber music, regular appearances for Chamber Music Society of the Lincoln Centre, an advocate for music in our time. We can go on all day about that. Many collaborations and premieres, for example, Tam Dun's Violin Concerto in Carnegie Hall's China Festival. Many awards for his CDs. Is that enough? Shall I go on?
No,
That's
just stop.
Now, sitting next to Cho Langen is Dean Olding. And Dean is not on the jury this time, but he has been. And he is the artistic advisor for this competition and has been that for quite some time. Now, Dean, I haven't written anything about you, but now, let me see. Co-concertmaster.
I won't be embarrassed.
We won't be embarrassed. Co-chair, co-concertmaster of the Sydney Symphony, right? The Golden Quartet, still, with very close associations with New Zealand. Been on many juries and a soloist. And tell me something else that I've left out.
One of my other current activities is with the Australia Ensemble, another mixed chamber group based in Sydney at the University of New South Wales.
There you are. So that's Dean. We're very pleased that he's there. Now, Tasman Little. She's been in New Zealand for 2 weeks, and she's been nakeding, violining all over the country. Now, it's incredible. Now, when you realise that when this project began on the internet, within days there were 6,000 links to the website. So it just shows you how much that kind of thing was needed in this world of music. That suddenly you struck the nail on the head and made that connection, and she's continued to make this connection with young people. Artistic director of the Delius Inspired Festival, which was broadcast for a whole week on BBC Three. They wouldn't take you on for a whole week unless it was worthwhile, would they? And then she's taken the music to every continent and every part of the world, worked with most of the famous orchestras. She's played Ligeti's challenging concerto in the Proms, but also in Berlin and Salzburg and Philadelphia, New York and roundabout. Hard work. And she joined the London Mozart Play as a soloist and tour director. So there's many, many strings to her bow, if you pardon the expression. Now I'm going to talk to Vesamati Lappanen next, who is concertmaster of the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, and I know Anne has been trying to get him onto the jury for a while and succeeded this time, so that's fantastic. He studied at Turku Conservatory in Finland and the Sibelius Academy, which must have come with some kind of, I don't know, you had to live up to something having been at the Sibelius Academy, right? I'm sure you did. At 16, he won the Heinemann National Violin Competition for Young Violinists and joined the Concordo String Quartet, right? He joined the Turku Philharmonic Orchestra and became co-concertmaster. And of course, he's toured New Zealand as concertmaster with the MHIVC and worked alongside greats such as Pekka Zukerman, Gertje Kupersson and Lang Lang and others. And you're here now, so welcome. And after last night, I'm just amazed that Lara St. John is able to sit on the stage because she played an absolutely exhausting Mendelssohn violin concerto last night, and I was lucky enough to be in the audience. It was with the Auckland Philharmonia Orchestra, a fantastic performance. And so the critics say of Lara, something of a phenomenon. Played with orchestras all over North America, Europe, China and Japan, and she's currently on a tour involving 45 concerts. Here, Australia, Singapore and Ireland. Is this news to you?
I think it's more like 27.
More like 27. Somebody's gilded the lily here. The recordings are legendary. The Simon Bolivar Youth Orchestra of Venezuela, and a recording of Vivaldi's Four Seasons and Piazzolla's The Four Seasons of Buenos Aires won huge accolades. We've had it played a lot on radio in New Zealand, I tell you. And Bach, Michael Bach. She recorded the 6th Bach solo, didn't she, in 2007?
Yeah.
And the double album won iTunes Prize that year?
Well, it was just like the best selling.
We just like the best-selling CD of all time. That's what she's trying to say. No. But anyway, an electrifying player. So there you are. That's a little bit about Lara St. John. Now the tough bit for them. I just ask the questions. They have to answer them. So let's start with, I think we'll start with Boris. It's quite difficult doing a panel discussion amongst 8 people in a round table situation where you're trying to get some interaction. So we'll see what we can do. Boris, obviously it's hard to ask you this question. It's a silly question because if your father was a musician, obviously you were bound to be one. Is that so, or did you want to do something else?
Yeah, this is the reason for taking up music as a career. I didn't have any choice.
You had to be a musician?
I had to be a musician. My parents decided in my place. I'm very happy now.
No.
Yeah.
You weren't then, were you?
Yeah, but it's because I've got some question. And why the violin? Other instrument, special quality of the violin. So this, I didn't have any question about that.
It had to be the violin.
Yeah, it had to be like that. My father taught me each day, not much, 2 hours each day, but during 10 years.
How old were you when you started these lessons?
6.
6.
So until 16 he taught me each day. If you ask me now, what did he say? I don't know. I probably don't know. If you would ask me, for example, what did you eat 19th of November, 72 for the breakfast? I don't know. I don't remember. It's the same thing. It's came in myself naturally. So now I realize really, I was very lucky. I had only the biggest teacher in, you can imagine, the pupil of Yankelevich, but everything basic what I know to do is my father.
And tell me about this book your father wrote, which young violinists use as their tutor.
Step by step. Yeah, it's just sort of small, nice exercise for the basic technical things, starting from open strings, using the different rhythm in the right hand without using left hand, and after small, I would say small pieces as romance, cavatina, or something like that in the first position with piano. So very easy. Go through the double stops, and the end is a sort of fugato. It's not fuga yet, but it's sort of
it's
fugata.
It's on the way.
It's a top. Yeah. So, but it was a sort of bestseller at that time in Russia, and I knew from different people they could find it in the United States and Europe.
Wonderful. Thank you for the introduction, your introduction to music, and you had no choice.
No, I had no
you were
choice.
born to it, weren't you?
But I think I had no choice because nobody asked me, but because I was surrounded by that, I would choose by myself.
Yes. Thank you. Would you like to hand the microphone to Vesa, please? Vesa Mati Lebanon. Ask you that question now. Why music for you? If that's the question. The question is, why music as a career and why the violin?
Well, I think it's very similar. I didn't have a choice. Well, I thought I had a choice, but then my mother kept saying to me that I'm really bad with everything else. So it's actually, and although I actually understood that's true. I can't do anything else. And but for teenage boy, it's not easy to be a violinist. It's not the coolest thing for a young boy. So there was a bit of a struggle at times, and I was lazy. But I sort of grew into it. I worked in the orchestras from very early on. In fact, Turku Philharmonic, where I started working quite professionally, they invited me to be a casual player already when I just turned 16, and I immediately I loved it from the beginning. In fact, I still remember the first concert, which was Tchaikovsky's Sixth Symphony, and Igor Petrovny, wonderful violinist, Russian violinist, and conductor, by the way, in the end of his career. That's right. He was conducting it, and obviously knew Tchaikovsky's music very well, and I still remember the goosebumps in the end of the last moment when I was playing the last desk of second line. So that was sort of a starting point when I realized that this is actually a really cool thing.
How old were you when you were playing that Tchaikovsky set?
16.
16. The age was important. You were set on a musical career from that point on. This is what you wanted to do, nothing else.
Yeah, and since then, every time I play Tchaikovsky's Sixth, whatever orchestra, whoever is conducting, it's always disappointment. And it's obviously not that we play worse than them, or it's not as good conductor, or I don't like the interpretation. It's all to do with the fact that how I felt then and how strong the feelings were at the time. But that really made me an orchestra violinist, I think.
Terrific, thank you. Now, Michael, can we have a word from you, Michael? Michael, you said your parents German and English. Was there music in your background right at the very beginning? Or
well, my background's a bit different than a lot of people, I think, because I was basically brought up in the circus. My father was an acrobat, my mother was a high wire walker. My grandfather was a high wire walker, best friends with Charlie Chaplin. And my father played the violin, but he did it doing a headstand. And he didn't do it very well. So I think that's why I picked up the violin. I thought if I start playing, he'll stop, but he's still going 50 years later.
To this day, Michael can balance a violin on his chin.
And then, always, circus was a background. But between that and being a serious musician, there's quite a big jump. So how did you make that jump into serious music?
I had a fantastic teacher in Germany at one stage, and he recommended I should, keep playing the violin and take it up seriously. And I think when I was about 14, I decided that's the direction I want to go, and then it just all fell into place.
Were your parents disappointed?
My mum was, my dad wasn't.
And so from there, it was just success and hard work from that point.
Hard work, yeah.
Excellent. Now, perhaps since Dean's next to you, and Dean, the two of you are co-concert masters of the Sydney Symphony, is that right? How does that work, Dean?
We just keep the same chair warm.
Does this mean it allows you to go off and do different things, like playing quartets or teach or whatever?
It means the orchestra in Sydney doesn't have a leader at the moment. Yes, exactly. It gives the flexibility for the concert master of the orchestra to have another life outside the orchestra, and I think it's recognised that it's important for people in that position and to attract those kinds of players for that chair, that they have a different musical world as well, which enables them to play solos, and in my case, solos and quartets and whatever else happens. And we're also the roving ambassadors for the orchestra in that way too.
How did you take the first leap into music? What was the first thing that made you a
musician? Both my parents are concert pianists and still active. And the reason I played the violin was we didn't have 3 pianos at home. We only had 2 pianos, and besides, it's always difficult, I think, to play the same instrument as your parents. And for some occasion, a cellist came to visit the house. And I was probably about 3 years old, and I really liked the sound of the cello, and wanted to play the cello from that point on. And because I was only about 5 at the time we were deciding on what instrument, it must have been difficult to get a really small cello in those days. I don't think Suzuki was really on the scene, at least not in Brisbane. And so they didn't make those small instruments, so they just gave me a violin and said, here, do that. And I remember I was taken to the Conservatory of Music, and my father was a piano professor, and I was introduced to the violin professor there, Jan Shadivka, his name was, and he was a Czech violinist who came out to Australia, a very fine player, pedagogue, and he studied, I think, with Shevchik, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, from the Czech tradition, I think it was a pupil of Shevchik, and he was a big, scary man with the leonine hair and so on, and he wanted to see my hand, and I thought he was going to cut it off, actually. I just wouldn't show him my hand. It was hiding behind my back, and I wouldn't show him my hand. Little 5-year-old boys are hiding behind my parents. He just wanted to see how big my hand was, to see what size violin I needed to play, but I was so scared of him. But I recovered, and I was playing the violin, and I'm so glad I didn't play the cello. I'd have to pay for an extra airline seat and carry it around. So that's how I started to music. I guess I couldn't avoid it.
Well, it seems that everybody had a musical background of some sort, that the course was charted and that was the way you had to go. Cholan Lin, would you take the microphone? Did you have a musical background to encourage you to be a musician?
No. My father was a scientist. He worked in a lab working on various radiation properties, being a physicist. And my mother was a high school English teacher. But there was a lot of music being played in the house because my father really loved music. So he brought all sorts of recordings home. And his greatest passion was great violin playing. So from, I think, when I was 3 or 4 on, I was inundated by, 5 different recordings of the Tchaikovsky Concerto and 16 recordings of the Mendelssohn. And who were my favorites?
No, who was the favorite?
Oh, my HIVC, Milstein, Oistrakh, Stern. I could tell because my parents thought that I was so good at identifying these recordings. My father challenged me over dinner to drop the needle on the LP and say, okay, who's playing this and why? Why do you think it's Francis Scali and it's not Milstein? And so I could apparently identify them very easily. So my parents thought I would become a music critic one day. Seriously. But then the true instigator was a next door neighbor, another boy my age, similar age, slightly older. He began to take violin lessons. And that was it. I just had to do whatever he was doing. And so that led to my first violin and first lesson.
Were your parents disappointed you weren't a scientist?
My father was really horrified as to how bad in mathematics I was. And I couldn't do the simplest homework on math, and he just said I was useless. But then when I was able to play a Mozart concerto for the very first time, all was forgiven.